Greetings and salutations, everyone. It is I, Samius, and we are doing another build review, life review, whatever you want to call it, here on youtube.com/SamusGrova. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. This life was a different one for me. It has been the first time that I've actually played the Alchemist Bombardier build. And we'll pull up the list here in 1 second. But, we pull it up now, I suppose. And it's a pretty straightforward build, I think. There may be a few things here and there that I did a little differently that some other people may or may not do, depending on the situation. But it's level 20 Alchemist, max intelligence. Secondary score was Constitution, and then some charisma, kind of going on in there. Nothing too fancy. Feat wise, I think was pretty straightforward. I really focused on my conjuration spell DCs. It's something we'll talk about in just a little bit down the line, but that was just kind of the way I decided I wanted to go, instead of trying to focus on the transmutation DCs. I finally started to see the point of maybe spending a little bit more time working on both, trying to get all of your DCs up, but that seemed a little bit over challenging without spending more resources on it than I really wanted to at the time. So as you may notice, in the Bombardier tree, I currently have 43 points. I could easily see going even deeper point-wise in the Bombardier tree if you're playing solo. I could see taking the Rapid Consolidation SLA to get the extra 20% concealment going on. But those kind of effects are not very helpful, I feel, while streaming. So I didn't take it. I could also see taking Wand and Scroll Mastery. Like, those are things that I think are very good. I could also see maxing out the Metamagic enhancement or cost reduction line here. One of the things that I did feel about the Alchemist in general, and I think a lot of people get this assumption, is that it is a very mana intense class. And I think part of the reason behind that is people do not do a very good job of managing their mana efficiently. I think they do a better job of trying to manage their time efficiently. Therefore, they would rather just, every time they wind up to throw a spell, that it's maximized, empowered, quickened, accelerated bottle, everything. And that's just not the case to efficiently get through a quest, mana-wise. Time-wise, yes. Mana-wise, no. So, coming from a wizard background and kind of being used to determining whether or not you need the spell to be maximized, empowered, yada yada yada, is a skill that I think wizards of the past have harnessed, and I think that that's a skill that current day alchemists probably should work on as well. Again, we'll talk about that just a little bit more deeper down the line here, but definitely lowering the cost per spell, I think, is really important. One of the things that I actually ended up doing quite a bit was I would use various bard hirelings along the way as basically my only hirelings throughout the game, really, this life. I'm trying to think if I even used like a cleric. I think a little bit in the early game I may have used a cleric hireling to DV me, but primarily I used a spellsinger bards to reduce the spell cost that extra 10%, and that really made a big difference in my leveling process, making sure I have mana all the way through the end. There was still a few times where I ran out of mana. I think I ended up drinking 5 major mana potions this life, and it was pretty much all of them were in 1 or 2 quests. I don't really remember exactly the details, but I know that overall I started with 100 and I put away 95 at the end of this at the end of the run. So reducing your mana cost and being efficient with your decision process of do I need to be casting this with all of my meta magics, or do I need a non-meta magic version to kind of get things done? Let's see, what else in this Bombardier tree? As you can tell, we kind of maximized our critical chance. I took all these different, in the Pyrite reaction. I ended up taking Swift Ambition later, but I kind of do wish I would have had it a little bit earlier as well. Yeah, overall, I could easily see putting even more points in this tree. I started really liking Smoke Bomb in the epic levels. I felt like it was a lot more useful there. I really didn't cast it that much in the heroics. So I could see taking that as well, just to have, that on an SLA. But honestly, it's only 18 mana to cast it for mana, and that's only what 6 mana more than you can get it if you spend all 3 action points on it. So I didn't bother. I didn't bother very much. Let's see, what else? The Apothecary tree, I really like a lot of the different things out of here. I thought that the Alchemical Shield was extremely important as soon as I had the opportunity to move into there. I switched out of heavy armor and into robes, into cloth, just to be able to have this Alchemical Shield all the time. It was one of the things that actually was a struggle when encountering in the Reaper modes. And we'll talk about that again in a little bit. But getting hit by magic missiles out of nowhere for tons and tons of damage, and other spellcasting procs and stuff like that was very painful. So having the Alchemical Shield all the time, I felt was a big aid. In the early levels, the spell-like ability Inflict-like Wounds was really nice. I think that if I were to do it again, I would have gone ahead and flipped it back to the Cure. As soon as I had enough spells that I felt like I could work through my timers, and as long as I also had enough mana to kind of power through my timers. But until level 12, my ability to clear through the quest was basically casting my Vial of Sparks SLA, firing off my Inflict Light Wounds SLA, and then unmeta magicked Voltaic Induction, and then eventually Voltaic Burst. I ended up choosing Electric as my energy type. You could do fire, you could do cold. It doesn't really matter. I don't think in the low levels. There's one or two places where monsters are immune to electricity that I wasn't expecting in the low levels. I think some of the 12 quests in particular. But for the most part, I don't think it matters that much. If I were to pick over again, I would probably end up choosing cold, I think. Just kind of as a hedge the bet, but I don't know. Let's see. I didn't do very much in the Alchemist. I just went ahead and grabbed the other SLA just to kind of play with it. It actually was okay. I didn't feel like I needed any other points for it. All it really does is adjust its spell point cost and its cooldown. And I don't need to cast that spell very often. It's just not a spell that needs to happen. Let's see. Harper Agent. I basically went up Harper Agent here just for hit points and then a couple extra intelligent points. Mana. I mean, again, as you start to kind of fiddle with stuff, you realize what's important in this Alchemist tree, and it's just having enough mana to get to the end of the quest. And that really was it. And then my last couple of points after we hit level 20 and I took my multi-Vial of Sparks and stuff like that, I had 3 points left, and I was like, I could take 3 more universal spell power. It doesn't seem that hot. I could dump it into the Wanded Scroll Mastery, which would have been good. But I didn't. I wasn't really casting a lot of stuff that way. I was mostly soloing. I was only going to screw around for the rest of the evening yesterday at level 20. So I yeah, you know what? I'd rather grab 3 more MMR PRR and call it a day. So that's what I did. Yeah, it felt good. Nothing else really made a lot of sense to me. Over here in the half-elf tree, these are, I'm pretty sure, all of my racial points now kind of spent. There may be one more point in here that's not. But I picked up saving throws because more saving throws are always good, especially when you have evasion because of liquid luck. It felt really good. I picked up more spell points and spell penetration. Spell penetration wasn't needed all that much in my experience. I think Turn to Frog might have spell resistance. Yes, it says yes, spell resistance. But pretty much everything else is damage. I guess you have things like Flesh to Gold. That one says no. Flash Freeze says yes. Yeah, I just don't think there's that much you need to worry about for spell resistance in here, but I could be wrong. But 100 more spell points was a no-brainer, especially since you could pick them up pretty early with your, I don't want to say free, but like the points that you earned from doing past lives. Something I thought was kind of cool was this Action Surge Intelligence. If you watch me play, I actually used a lot of the Action Surge type spells as I was leveling up. Sprint Boost I used a ton. I didn't use the Spell Boost spell power as much as I would have liked. I think I could have taken it earlier and I would have been really happy to have it. But you know, I ended up taking it eventually. And all those spell boost spells did actually get affected by the Action Surge, in my case, Intelligence. So I found that to be really, you know, as a way to boost my spell DC a little bit more. Then I had the opportunity to also take the spell power boost, thinking that I'd be able to fire them off on multiple timers. Of course, that's not the case. But it was still nice to have them both as options. This way, if I didn't want to, like, mess up my reaction, like go out of Pyrite, for example, but I still wanted to hit a spell boost, I could just click the spell power boost and be okay. So it was still nice to have them both. In the end, I don't think you need them both, or at least I didn't need them both very often, but still nice to have. Speaking of things that are nice to have, because I've got a little bit of Purple Dragon Knight past live action, the cooldown on the bottled sprint boost and the Purple Dragon Knight, and also the action boost. If you watch these timers down here for a second, this is on a 36-second time. Whichever one you cast goes on a 36-second countdown, which means everything else goes on a reduced countdown. So you could hit the sprint boost button, let it go through its cycle, and then when it is over, right? So we're almost done. We only have like 7 seconds left without it. So then you could turn right around and fire off like your Purple Dragon Knight. That one goes on a full 60-second countdown, right, as you notice. However, because the sprint boost is still on cooldown, you have the opportunity to fire it off as soon as the as your rallying cry is off. So you have an opportunity to like really get some good speed boosts. You have the same thing that can kind of work with spell power boosting to kind of like stack the way some of these things work together. And I felt like a lot of situations it was worth having both on your bar. All, I guess in this case, 5 things on my bar, 2 different sprint boosts and 3 different spell power boosts. Oh, getting interrupted by Jerry. I forgot I had him up in the other tab. Let's see. What else I think was really important? Spells. Let's look at the spells really quickly. I ended up casting this glue bottle like all the time. Or glue bomb. I felt like it was probably the most useful of the spells, to be really honest. But before multi-vial, in a crowd control type function. I know that you have salt crystals, which is also okay, but I didn't care for it that much. I felt like you had to be really close as opposed to the glue bottle. I cast some flash freeze. The nice thing about flash freeze is it hits elementals, where Flesh to Gold Mass did not. So something to think about. And then I didn't cast this many hypnotic combinations, but it did work on Reapers, and it's one of the few ways that you can kind of crowd control Reapers on the Alchemist build, as far as I can tell. But yeah, it seemed good. Leveling up, I really liked Evolution. Evolution was one of the first spells I could as soon as I could cast it, I carried around Evolution, then Voltaic Induction, and then I think I actually started carrying around Melt Lock. The ability to bypass locks is really nice as a spellcaster, and it always felt good. It always seemed to work pretty well. What? Okay, that doesn't matter. Let's see. I mentioned that I was trying to do Conjuration focus quite a bit. So, especially when you're running around with a unmaximized, unheightened, unpowered, like all that goody stuff at level 12, I feel like having that as an option is very, very relevant, very important. And you want monsters to fail their saving throws, especially if they have evasion. You don't want them to pass their saving throws at all, again, with the unmetamagic, unempowered spell point cast. So if you look down here, my Multiviola Sparks does 18 spell point cost right now, reduced from 20. Probably because of a ship buff, I'm assuming. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So for 18 mana, I was able to do a pretty reasonable amount of damage. And then, because my spell DC is only a couple of different, it's what, 65 versus 66? I felt like I was able to more consistently get that to land. The reason I mention this is because some of these sets a little bit later, say like I'm using the Beacon of Magic set right now, but the Ravenloft's or the Sharn set that you might switch into doesn't have a lot of wiggle room for keeping your Conjuration DC up high. I forget which set I was looking at, but it used the goggle slot, which meant I have to give up my Summoner's Goggles, which means that then my option became craft something, which you could totally do, and I feel like that's probably worthwhile for a lot of people out there if you're going to play an Alchemist long term, where you're going to do several lives as an Alchemist. I'm not that person. I'm not a guy who's going to rotate lives a lot of this, I don't think, depending on what the voting says. So I kept the Summoner Spectacles slot to keep my Conjuration focus high, and that I felt ended up doing more damage long term than, say, switching in for -3 to my spell DCs, but picking up, I think, 10 spell power or something like that, 20 spell power. It was not a significant enough spell power increase, in my opinion, to offset losing 3 spell DC. Again, you could craft a necklace to kind of make up that spell DC, but then you're losing the Inherit of the Mist set, and then you're losing 10 universal spell power, and then did you really gain anything? So for me, I just kept it the same. It made things easy. On the downside, that also meant that I didn't get any real gear upgrades after level 12. Yeah, it was kind of lame in that regard, but it was still nice to kind of be solidified and not have to worry about gear that much. A little bit of A, a little bit of B. Speaking of, I switched my gear around to get ready to TR, so I can't show you my spell power when I ended. But without a appropriate spell power stick, as you can tell, it's like 350, give or take. And it was a little bit higher than that with the appropriate spell power stick, but it was just fine. It was good. I felt like I was doing plenty of damage with what I was doing, so I didn't feel like I had to squeak out every single point. Let's see. What else did I say we'd talk about a little bit later? Man, I wish I would have taken notes on things that I was talking about. All right, let's move into the crux of the build. For me, there's two big points of the Alchemist. I think one is really heavily in its favor, and I think one, for me personally, is a negative, but I think for a lot of people is also going to be a positive. So I felt like the build was extremely powerful out of the box. Like I said, I've never played one of these before. And as soon as I hit level 12, I felt like I could start pushing. Multi-Vial just was so incredibly good off the top that I felt like I could push and push and push. And I ended up doing a lot of quests from level 12 to level... Well, I mean, I could have done it all the way from the rest of the way to Cap. On Reaper 4, mostly solo, with my hireling to cast my Bard Song. Okay, so in that regard, that's a pretty good perk, right? Like being able to run around on Reaper 4 with not that much effort, a little bit of Ravenloft gear to farm up, and having like a reasonable UMD. It seemed good, right? And what really made that happen takes me into point number 2. It is this right here, Weakening a Mixture. So Weakening Mixture, the first time you hurt something with in this case, an electric spell, it removes or strips the electric effect and makes them vulnerable to electricity for essentially the rest of their life, because they're basically dead after that. But the thing about it is, Multi-Vial throws 4 vials. So the first vial strips their immunity. Then you have the next 3 vials to kill the monster. Now, on one hand, that's great. That means you don't have to worry about secondary spell power. You don't have to worry about like a lot of various decision trees. You kind of have you focus in your school, and everything is that school. So, you know, like I said, electric vial of sparks, electric multi-vial, voltaic burst, my spell-like ability up here, level 12, electric. Eventually I picked up the spell-like ability multi-vial. I talked about relying heavily on voltaic induction. I mean, that's what kind of boiled into. I twisted in energy burst electric. Like, you didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. On the downside, especially from level 12 to level 20, and that's kind of specifically what I want to talk about, is that it stripped away all the real decision making for me. So one of the things that I really enjoy about a spellcasting class is that lightning fast decision you have to make on what spell to cast and when, on what targets is it going to be the most effective and the best. The problem is, once you had this ability to strip a mixture and multi-vial, that became your hammer, and everything else became a nail. You just didn't care anymore. Oh, multi-vial. Walk around the corner. Oh, multi-vial. Oh, it didn't all die. I'll slam I'll hit the 1 key, or I'll hit the 8 key, or the set. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, multi-vials. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, they died, or they didn't die. Follow up. Like, there was no decisions left to be made. At level 20 and moving into epic levels, I felt like that started to shift a little bit. So perhaps some of that kind of comes back a little bit, because the monsters do have so many hit points that there's a situation where turning to frogs might be good. Situations where crowd control effects might again start becoming the decision, or becoming part of the decision tree. But I really felt like, oh, I saw a monster, multi-vial. Boop. And so my decision became, is it a champion that needs the maximize in power, etc. version, or is it a Reaper that needs the big version, or not? And that really boiled down to 100% of my decisions after level 12, and until level 20. And really and that's at Reaper 4. And really after sometimes I did a little, like I said, a little bit, as you can tell, what, 40,000, almost 500,000 experience points in Reaper experience or legendary. Hell, wow, maybe we can find the right words in heroic experience. And it just, like I said, it there was some more stuff going on with like, oh, maybe I should be crowd controlling instead here, and just instead of just relying on multi-vials all the time. So yeah, for me, that was a big turnoff for the build. It was something that I really like about like the Tiefling Fire Sworks and stuff like that, is that you have a spell that you can cast to remove the resistances, right? It doesn't apply to every single spell you toss all the time. And I feel like that became, it just removed the decision tree for me. So for me, it shaved off some fun. Became something that people would ask me what I thought about the Alchemist. And that was the first thing that came to mind, is that I don't like this, I don't care for this, yada yada yada. And what I'd like to see is that modified in some way, whether this modifies a different spell or whether it applies to the entirety of the spell. So like if multi-vial, it becomes your first thing, then it just strips from the first range of spells. Something. I feel like it's too autopilot-y at this point in time, and I would like to see some sort of little bit of change. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'm not saying nerf the build forever. Or you could change this weakening a mixture to throw a vial that has that effect first. Have it cost 1 mana, I don't care, 10 mana, whatever. Something to like, at least it's some amount of forethought going into it, instead of just spam. It doesn't matter, everything just dies. So yeah, those are kind of like, that's the positives and the negatives of the build. I would recommend it to people to play and have a little bit of fun. I said it didn't take much work or effort at all to make one that I felt was Reaper viable very easily into what I consider pretty good Reaper for solo play. And I even did a couple of R5s by myself. I'm not as familiar with those new tier of Reapers, which is why I really didn't push that far beyond into Reaper 5, but I feel like I probably could have. The couple of quests that I did do at Reaper 5 felt fine, and just I don't have experience with those Reapers because I play by myself, so I felt like it's a little bit difficult to move into that thing. But I think with some practice and some experience, you could easily TR Reaper R5, R6, etc. as a Alchemist build. Very strong class. Definitely worth checking out, definitely worth playing. I think for me in the future, because I've now played the Vile Alchemist, I've now played the Bombardier, and I've experimented a little bit with the Apothecary tree. I think for me, the trees I have the most fun in is probably the Apothecary tree. I played the Undead Alchemist on the hardcore server. Season 2, we'll just say season 2, and I really enjoyed it. I felt like it added a lot of variety and fun to the game, the process. But that's a different scenario, because on the hardcore server you pretty much always are playing with groups and different situation, right? The Alchemist build that I did was kind of like my traditional bard rogue splash thing, using daggers, pulling into the Alchemist. Again, I felt like it was very good, it was very strong, but definitely the bottom tier of fun. As an Alchemist, I felt like that primarily boosted the fun I had with the Swashbuckler, as opposed to elevating the Alchemist class. So for me, if I were to rank the three things on the level of fun, I would say Apothecary, Bombardier, then Alchemist. If I was going to rank them based off power, I would definitely say Bombardier is hands and above everything else, and I don't even know where anything else would fit on the scale. I put out a power scale for hardcore server based off of my personal play experience and the like, and Bombardier has kind of reset that scale of the power level. It is the new tier 1. It blows pretty much everything else I've played out of the water for quite a while. So enjoy it while you have it. Don't complain if it gets rolled back a little bit here in the coming weeks, coming months. But yeah, play it while it's hot. Alright everybody, thanks for watching this video. I do appreciate it. If you could, do me a solid. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscription button. I would really appreciate it. Also, check us out live at twitch.tv/SamusGarobo. And I'll see you guys real soon. Thanks for watching. Toodles.